Hi, this is David Schwartz, also known as Joel Katz, CTO at Ripple. Um, I recently released a list of suggestions for XRP ledger development, and I got a lot of questions about the stablecoin proposal. So I thought it might be helpful for me to walk through what I have in the design to give people a better idea of how I intended the system to work. So first of all, it's a collateralized stablecoin. That means tokenized assets whose value are expected to remain constant in some unit. So if it's a dollar stable coin and you have 10 of it, you're expecting its value to remain stable at $10. These assets have a backing asset, in this case XRP. That means that there is something that is supposed to guarantee its value. Now, in some of those systems, you can actually redeem the stablecoin for the backing asset. In some, you can't. What's interesting about this proposal is that the stable coins are perfectly liquid to XRP at face value on the ledger. So in other words, if you have a dollar in a dollar stable coin designed on the system, what you have is a $1 claim on XRP enforceable by the ledger's payment mechanics. And the reason that that's important is with some other stablecoin designs, if the stablecoin isn't popular, it won't necessarily be liquid. If it's not listed on an exchange, if it can't easily be deposited and withdrawn, it won't be that useful. By the design of this system, the stablecoins can be offered through the on-ledger decentralized exchange, and they spend like XRP. So you don't need to find some way to make them liquid. You can just spend them right on the ledger. And of course, they can be pegged to anything that someone can provide a price feed on. Fiat currencies are probably what people typically think of, like dollars and euros or whatever. But they can also be pegged to things like stocks or precious metals or any other value source. As long as someone can provide a price feed for it, you can have a stablecoin pegged to that value. So there are 5 critical components to the system. There's the operator. That's the person or entity that provides the price feed and creates the system. There's the price feed itself. There are the collateralized positions. These are the things that hold the collateral. Then there's the redemption process, which is the way that someone who holds the stable coin converts it into XRP in a payment. And then there's a series of incentives to ensure that the stable coin remains convertible to sufficient XRP to back its value. The stablecoin operator has to have an account on the XRP ledger, and they have to decide to operate specific stablecoin systems. So they might say, I'm going to provide a USD stablecoin, and that means that they're going to operate a price feed. There are also some system parameters that they tune to ensure the system stability. The price feed establishes the rate at which the stablecoin is exchanged for XRP, and it's also used to determine whether there's enough collateralization. A system parameter would be the collateralization level, the minimum to issue, which might be, let's say, 150%. And so if you have $150 worth of XRP locked up, you could issue $100 in a stable coin. The price feed also controls when a position can be taken over. We'll talk about that more later. It's part of the incentive system. Prices can include an expiration time for safety or where needed. So if the price is inaccurate, that might allow people to issue more of the stable coin than the system can collateralize, or that might allow people to redeem the stable coin and claim too much collateral. So it's critical that the price feed be accurate. The operator can provide a expiration time in the price, and if there's no price provided by the operator, then issuing and redeeming halts. Now, sometimes that's a good thing. So imagine if I wanted to issue a price feed pegged to Apple stock. It would be very odd if right around the time that Apple announced their earnings or while the market was closed and the price couldn't be well determined, there might be a race to take advantage of a misprice. So for something where the price can't be determined at all times, the system operator just doesn't provide a price during the time when the price can't be determined. Now that means you can't issue or redeem, but someone who holds the stable coin and wants to spend it is still not screwed because there's still the on-ledger decentralized exchange. So if someone's willing to buy the asset on ledger, they can still sell it. The redemption process is just paused. So there are these things called collateralized positions. They're on-ledger structures that someone owns, and they hold some amount of XRP, and they can issue an associated stablecoin. That's also what's redeemed against to convert the stablecoin to XRP. If you have a collateralized position, that's an asset that belongs to you. And it has a positive value in the XRP held and a negative value in the stablecoin issued. So for example, if I lock up $150 worth of XRP and I issue $100 in a dollar stablecoin, that position represents my ownership of the $150 worth of XRP, but my debt of the $100 worth of stablecoin. So it has a value of $50, and that will fluctuate with the value of XRP, and it functions like a leveraged long. They're tracked in an order book by collateralization level, and I'll explain more later about what that order book does. A redemption is the conversion of a stablecoin to XRP through the redemption system. It will be built into the ledger's payment logic through an IOU to XRP order book. So there's already an order book to sell the stablecoin. People who want to buy the stablecoin for XRP can place offers in the order book if they want, and there'll be a synthetic offer for redemption against the collateral pool. That provides assurance that the on-ledger payments can always be made by stablecoin holders. So if you hold $10 worth of XRP or you hold $10 in a stablecoin built according to the system, it should spend the same. Pathfinding, the first thing it will discover is that you can sell the stablecoin. The stablecoin might actually behave better than XRP because there might be people who want the stablecoin producing additional demand, so it's kind of like a value floor. It's at least as useful as an equivalent amount of XRP because you can convert it into an equivalent amount of XRP, but it also might be in greater demand for some reason. So it should track its value in XRP very, very well. It could theoretically exceed it if it's in high demand for some reason. Redemption operates against positions with the lowest collateralization level first, and I'll explain more about that later. So there are a system of incentives. One incentive is the least collateralized positions are redeemed against. So if you don't want your position to be redeemed against, you can over-collateralize it. A severely insufficiently collateralized position can be taken over. So if XRP drops in value and you don't put more XRP into your position, you may suffer a loss, other than the loss of the value of XRP. It's a small additional loss that's essentially like a margin call. Margin calls recollateralize positions in danger. So if your position's insufficiently collateralized and someone else is willing to recollateralize it, they get the position. The amount that they get is the amount that they're willing to bid. So for example, let's say, well, I'll show more later. I won't go into detail without... Anyway, the system operator creates some parameters. They're the issuer. They create the account that's the issuing account, and they pick a currency code. For US dollars, they'd probably pick USD. For other things, they can pick other currency codes. They provide the price of 1 unit of the stablecoin in drops of XRP, and that can be a fractional price. That can be, it's a floating point number. They specify the minimum collateralization rate to issue a stablecoin. 150% is sort of like my guess of a reasonable amount. And that ensures that the position doesn't become under-collateralized if there's a small drop in the price of XRP. They also specify the maximum collateralization rate to take over a position. And this is functions kind of like a margin call. We don't want positions to get under-collateralized below 100%. So when they're in a vulnerable position between the minimum collateralization rate and 100%, others are permitted to take them over by recollateralizing them. And then they can specify a sort of reserve tax rate. That could be a fee that goes to the operator for providing the system, or they can use that as a pool to recollateralize positions should there be a increase in the value of the pegged asset. So one of the interesting issues is the drop in the price of XRP can cause a problem, but so can a drastic increase in the thing that you've pegged it to. So for example, someone might issue a stable coin pegged to, let's say, Ethereum, and if Ether goes up, it has the same consequences if XRP goes down in such a system. So they can use that reserve tax to build a collateral pool to protect the system against shocks. But we would expect that the system's normal incentive mechanisms would be good enough in most cases to solve that problem. They could also use the reserve to protect themselves from those shocks by investing it in the asset. So for example, if you had a system that was pegged to the price of Apple stock, the system operator might take the reserve and get leverage longs. Let's say they might buy options to buy Apple stock. And that way, if the price of Apple stock shoots up, which might be a problem to the system, the operator will now have the funds to back the system. Again, in most cases, probably not necessary because of the system's incentives, but it can also just be used as a funding source for the operator. We want them to provide a good price feed, and if they're not getting paid to do it, it's difficult. The incentives might not be very good. So the system has a collection of operations. You can create a stablecoin system. If you're the operator, you can adjust the system parameters. You can manage your positions. If you have positions, you can create them, fund them, issue from them, pay them down, or release their funds. You can redeem a stablecoin for XRP when you make a payment, and you can make offers to take over positions and recollateralize positions. So the operator has to create the system. They specify the currency and the initial system parameters, and that has to be done before any positions can be created. So if you want to create a dollar stablecoin, you have to set those parameters, and then you have to convince people that you're going to provide a reliable price feed. They can always adjust the price. And they're expected to adjust the price regularly to maintain the peg accurately. The system operator can also adjust other parameters such as the tax rate and collateralization level. Now you might think that they could raise the tax rate to kind of harm people using the system, but the tax only applies when XRP is moved into a position. So if the system operator were to shoot the tax rate up to something unreasonable, people would probably just stop locking up XRP. Anyone can create a position. There's currently no support for authentication or authorization inside the system. When created, that position is attached to the owner, just like an offer would be or an escrow. And that will probably just be combined. So you'll create a position just by moving XRP into it, and if it doesn't exist, it will be created. The owner of a position can fund the position by placing more XRP in it as much as they want at any time. If there's any stablecoin issued from the position, that increases the collateralization rate. And we'll have that create a position if none exists, so you don't need a separate create operation. Issuing from the position is the only way to create any of a stablecoin. The position must be sufficiently collateralized after the issuance, so you can't issue so much of a stablecoin that you don't meet the minimum required collateralization rate to issue, and that will change the position's collateralization level. So, for example, if you were collateralized at 200%, you had, let's say, $100 in XRP locked up, and you only issued $50 of a stablecoin. If you issue more of the stablecoin, the collateralization level will drop. You can also pay down your position, which is the inverse of the issue operation. You have to have some of the stablecoin, you put it into the position, and you've increased your collateralization level. You have to have sufficient stablecoin. The stablecoin is destroyed in the process. So just like issuing creates stablecoin, paying down a position destroys stablecoin. The owner of a position can also release funds from the position. This can only be done by the position's owner, and it moves XRP from the position to the owner's account, reducing the collateralization level. You cannot reduce the collateralization below the required issued minimum, so no releasing of funds would be permitted if the position is at or below the required issue minimum. If there's no stablecoin outstanding against the position, you could reduce the position's XRP level to 0, in which case the position would be deleted because it doesn't serve any purpose. Just like transferring XRP into a non-existent position creates it, removing the last bit of XRP from a position destroys it. So let's say Alice has $150 worth of XRP and places that XRP into a newly created position. Alice can then issue $100 worth of the stablecoin to herself. We're assuming a dollar stablecoin with 150% minimum collateralization level. Alice can then use that stablecoin as she pleases for as long as she likes. She can sell it, she can trade it, she can use it to get more XRP, whatever she wants. If she wants to pay her position down and get her XRP back, she needs to get the stablecoin back. So she might buy $100 worth of the stablecoin, use it to pay her position down. She can now get all of her XRP collateral back, whatever it's worth, destroying her position. To redeem a stablecoin for XRP, we'll have to modify the IOU to XRP order book logic. Essentially, one synthetic offer will be injected into that order book that represents redemption against the collateral pool. That will redeem against the least collateralized positions first, eliminate them, and sort of cleaning out the junk. If there are reserve funds, it can even redeem against positions collateralized below 100%. But if there's no reserve, then you can't redeem against under collateralized positions. So, for example, let's say Alice has $100 in a USD stablecoin and wants to make a payment that requires XRP. If the least collateralized position has $200 in stablecoin issued with only $210 worth of XRP, that would be only 105% collateralized, which is frightening. Alice gets $100 worth of XRP because she has $100 in a USD stablecoin, so she doesn't have the $100 in stablecoin anymore. She gets $100 worth of XRP to spend. Now, if you think about the position, if you subtract out the XRP but add in the stablecoin, the position now has $110 worth of XRP, because Alice got $100 worth of XRP. It had 210 before. But now there's only $100 in stablecoin issued, so it's 110% collateralized. So redeeming against a position raises the position's collateralization level because it still has the same amount of excess collateral, but the issued amount is smaller. So redeeming against poorly collateralized positions improves their collateralization. This is one of the incentive mechanisms that kind of keeps the system stable. So if you have a system that a position that falls below the takeover minimum, which is we recommend 105%, it's still over collateralized, but it's in danger. We have the equivalent of a margin call here. We want to recollateralize the position to at least 150%, and whoever does that gets the excess collateral. Participants can bid to take over positions for the least amount of compensation. So you might say, hey, I'll take over someone's position and I only want 2%. So let's look at how that might work. Let's say Alice has $150 worth of XRP in a position, creates $100 in a stablecoin, and the price of XRP drops till Alice's XRP is only worth $105. So we now have a position that owes $100 in stablecoin, but only has $105 worth of XRP. That position is still worth $5, but it's in danger of becoming under collateralized, so it represents a risk to the system. So if Bob has the lowest bid, Bob can take over Alice's position by putting $45 worth of XRP into it. If you put $45 more XRP into the position now has $150 worth of XRP. It still issued $100 in stablecoin, so it's now 150% collateralized. Bob made the system better by fixing the insufficiently collateralized position. Now Bob had to put $45 worth of XRP into this position, but this position is worth $50. This position for Bob can turn $100 worth of stablecoin into $150 worth of XRP. Bob paid $45 for a right that's worth $50. Bob made $5. Alice lost that $5, but that's the risk you take when you have a leveraged long. Alice could have avoided that by removing the position or recollateralizing the position. Who gets to take over a position? We're proposing an order book of takeover bids with a size in XRP and a compensation rate in percent. So you could say, hey, I have 50,000 XRP that I want to use to recollateralize positions, and I need to make at least 3%. Whoever offers the lowest rate will get to recollateralize, and that will save the person whose position is taken over from a big loss. So instead of Alice losing 5%, if someone will take over the position for only 3%, then Alice loses less money. So there's also a reserve. The ratio is set by the operator, which can be 0 for no reserve. The reserve is paid into when you add XRP to a position. In the examples before, we sort of assumed a 0 reserve, but you could tax, let's say, 0.1% as funds go into the positions. The reserve is stored in the operator's account, which means it's shared by all the stablecoins they issue. When a reserve is available, we'll redeem the position with the lowest collateralization, even if it's below 100%, and we'll pay the difference out of the reserve to clean up the junk. When no reserve is available, you can't redeem against a position that's less than 100% collateralized. There just isn't enough XRP to take out of it, and so that can't happen. So let's walk through one example of redemption with a reserve. So let's say Alice has $100 in a USD stablecoin, and she wants to make a payment that requires XRP. There is a reserve, and the least collateralized position has $100 in stablecoin issued with only $90 worth of XRP. Of course, we would hope a takeover would prevent this, but let's assume nobody was willing to take the position over. So this position is only collateralized at 90%. It's under collateralized. Alice still gets $100 worth of XRP and loses her $100 stablecoin. $10 worth of XRP comes from the issuer's reserve and goes to Alice's payment. And the under collateralized position is removed since it has no XRP left. What's interesting here is that the reserve is essentially a subsidy to whoever created the position because they got to hold their leveraged long in XRP against a price drop longer than they normally would have. So what are the benefits of this system? So number one, it drives on ledger liquidity. These stablecoins are liquid to XRP, and people who hold these stablecoins will be making payments as if they had XRP, so there'll be more demand for liquidity from XRP into other assets. And it provides derivatives with exposure to anything, stocks, metals, and so on. And you don't have to worry about getting these assets listed in exchanges or how people will acquire them. They can be purchased on the on-ledger exchange, and they can easily be redeemed, and so you can use them to buy any asset that's liquid to XRP. So there are some risks in the system. So one of them is tolerance to sudden drops in XRP price. If the price of XRP drops very rapidly, that could create shocks to the system. I believe the incentives will cover most of those cases, but you can always imagine cases where it's just more than the system can absorb. There could also be unaffected effects on XRP supply and demand. One example would be if XRP drops in value and people start to want to pull collateral out of these positions because they're worried about their positions becoming under collateralized, that might cause a sort of cascading effect where a drop in XRP causes people to become nervous, and so they pull out XRP, which continues to put downward pressure on the price. Operator malfeasance or incompetence is a little bit worrisome. The operator of the system has to provide the price feed. If the price feed is unreliable, the system becomes less useful. So you are trusting the operator. It's not completely decentralized. There are some little issues with XRP Ledger IOU math weirdness because of its finite precision. It's not that big a deal, and I can go into more detail if anyone's particularly interested. Some possible additions to the system. Some way to allow the operator to limit who can create positions, maybe requiring to authorize trust lines if someone wanted to do that for some reason. Ability to lock some parameters so the operator could assure that, let's say, the minimum collateralization level won't change. Doesn't seem that useful because they can always provide a bad price feed, so you can't protect yourself from a bad operator anyway. Ability to lock the reserve so it can only be used for redemption. Again, same argument. The operator of the system could provide a malicious price feed and do a lot of harm to the people using the system. So worrying about the monkeying with the reserve doesn't seem to be a particularly useful thing. The reserve is per issuer because it's in the issuer's account. You could imagine a per stablecoin reserve. So if an issuer had many stablecoins, they could have their own reserves. Don't see much point in it, but it could be done. That's it. If you got any questions, I'd be happy to listen to them.